Hello and welcome for another Catenda webinar. I'm your host today, Julien Benoit, and I'm in charge of customer success at Catenda. And the topic of today will be IFC creation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I will give you some tips and insights about how to produce better IFCs maybe inside your authoring tools, and also explain a bit what's the process for us when we get one of your file, how it's processed in a very simplified version, and why IFC quality matters to us. This session will last between 15 and 20 minutes together, so it will be very simplified in some aspects. I won't go into deep details on IFC exports because there's a lot that can be done in the main tools I will talk about, but I guess it will at least give you some put some lights on the area that you need to pay attention to when you export and produce these IFC files for your projects. So to start with, I will just explain briefly what happens to an IFC inside BIMsync. What's the process? Again, indulge me, it will be very extremely simplified. It won't go into fancy, intricate details about solution, software internally, etc. But it will give you at least the basics to understand what we do to process your files and why quality matters to us. Then we will have a look at two of the main softwares on the market today to produce deliverables for your projects. The first one being Revit, and the second one being ArchiCAD. I will show you some examples of good practices and bad practices, what to do and what to avoid in a way, so you have a better experience producing these files along the way. So let's get started with the first point. So what BIMsync does with your IFCs, what happens in the BIMsync engine so we can grab your IFC files and then deliver you with data and models. So in short, there's this graph that will explain what we do when you, as a user, are dropping an IFC file in our system. It goes through the web inside BIMsync engine, and here there's quality control. And you will understand in the next slide why that matters, because the data we host can be stored for a very long time, and part of the value we deliver to our customers is that you can get your data and your files at any time out of our system. So in order to provide you quality when you extract information and files from our system, we need to check that this quality is good enough to start with. Once this quality control is done, the file is processed in a system or systems, because there are several, that's called an IFC parser, and it's breaking down models into different slots, and I just put it here some of the most relevant and major ones, but there are, again, I just want to repeat that this is extremely simplified. So basically we store geometry in one bucket being a database actually. We store also the containers in definition of the IFC. Most of the objects are contained into something. A site is contained in a project, floor or building story is contained in a site, a room is contained in a story, etc., etc., etc. So that's a kind of specific aspect of the IFCs. Relations. We need to store in a specific way the relation between objects, a door and a wall, a window and a wall, etc., etc. And of course, we also have to store each data that is associated with any object, properties, name, numbers, GUIDs, etc., etc. So all of that is done when you see this little icon processing inside BIMsync. That's what is happening, basically. So why are we doing this? Because it makes our system efficient. It's available online, so that's why it needs to be efficient. But also, let's imagine at the end of the project or at the end of a period that could be a long time, let's say 20 years from now, you want to extract your information from our system, or your client or your next customer wants to extract information from its project. So we need to grab again the same buckets: geometry, containers, relations, data. Put all of this into an IFC engine that will produce inside BIMsync a file, go to the web, and this is an IFC file that will go to you or someone else, and you as holder, of course, and you expect from us that this IFC file is according to the IFC scheme in perfect quality and shape. So that's why, if you want to deliver quality at the end of a process, you need to have this quality control on the elements you integrate into your system. It's like any manufacturing process in a way, if I can make this analogy. If you want to produce quality cars, you need to check the quality of each parts of what constitute this car. I hope it makes sense. So, something to remember. IFC files are deliverables. I think that's key, and that's a message that maybe was lacking in the industry some years ago. It needs to be considered as a deliverables if you want to have success, because as much as you pay attention to details into your drawings and plans and documents, if you do the same for your IFC files and if you pay the same level of attention to your deliverables, then you will get success in your project and you will be able to participate into advanced project with great success. So I will try to explain what to do, or at least to give you some keys in order to achieve that. First one will be with Revit, and I will summarize in some minutes. Of course, it could be a day just talking about this. So I will really make it efficient and short. And what to pay attention to. The most important part will be what should I pay attention to produce quality IFC from Revit. So let's go to this guy. Here we go. So I made some topics, I think. Let's see. Yes. So first one, my first point here will be, please organize your project to export IFC. And what I mean by that, it's very simple. It's just prepare upfront views, or one view or several, that contains the elements that you want to export as IFCs, and only those elements. It seems obvious, but I can tell you that it's not implemented everywhere, and that's a very good practice, easy to set up, no extensive knowledge necessary. And once you've done that, it will solve a lot of cases. So you see here, I made a little 3D view called IFC export, and I just grab in this view only the elements that I want to be displayed, and nothing more, nothing less. Right? That's the first step. Second step, that's a bit more difficult sometimes. Deal with the mapping table. What does that mean? That means you will tell Revit what to export, how. Let me show you with an example. So to start with, you need to find this mapping table, or someone in charge in your office, in your organization, needs to set that up so everyone exports the IFC in the same way. You need to go to the file export, and in here, if you go at the very bottom, you have options. And in these options, you have one called IFC options, and you have this pop-up window showing you a file called IFC export classes and blah 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 with a text file in the end. So what does that mean is that you define what Revit category will be exported at as an IFC name or class, sorry, and then you can even go down to the IFC type, which means you can perfectly determine when you export some windows, some furniture, some doors, or even part of the core of the building, what they will be exported like. Let me show you. So some stuff, for instance, you see here, all the doors are exported as IFC door. And you see some part here, flex ducts are exported as IFC duct segment, and as an IFC type flexible segment. So all this, you can't really invent all that. You have a basic setup that's provided by Autodesk that kind of work most of the time. But you can find on the internet, there's I will provide a link probably in the description of this webinar when it will be published on our YouTube channel. There are some fantastic resources on the internet to guide you and provide you with great examples. That's one I have here. That's an example I found on the net that does a really great job for you to set the basics. So first of all, someone in your office, someone in your organization needs to set that correctly according to what you want to do, depending on your job. Right. Then, finally, I would say, because that's maybe the last, but also one of the important part, because this you will do each time, master your IFC export settings. Same. I have a shortcut to show that. It's export IFC. So if I show you where it is in the menu, you go same, export, bit down, IFC, and here it is. So in here you will specify your file name, your then setup to export your IFC. So if I click on modify setup, you will see there's a lot of things to deal with and a lot of things to consider. What I can show you here is that I will create one during this session, so I can show you how you can store and save these settings on your project. Let's call it briefly as the session. Here we go. So you see now it shows up in this list, and then you will select a bunch of stuff here that will be necessary. So something to pay attention to is coordinates. My advice, always use the shared coordinates here. Again, I won't go into details. I won't have time today to dig into all the details of these settings, but be aware that someone needs to pay attention to this. Additional content. Why did I say earlier that you need to set up a view specifically to export IFCs? Because you have the ability to export only elements visible in this view. So if you do that, if you select that, then it will be always what you export and there won't be any surprise. Property sets, that's important as well. I will show you a difference after that between a right IFC or a not so right IFC. I advise you to not export the Revit property sets, except if you really want to or you know what you're doing, but don't check that box. Base quantities, yes. Common quantities, yes. And if you have a more advanced setup, you can even define a specific property set and specific properties for your objects. Level of detail, keep it low. There's usually no need to more. And on some advanced and large MEP projects, you need to put it to extra low. So you can have a better or a smaller IFC file. On the advanced tab, the main topic would be to include the IFC site elevation. That's the minimum one. And you can play around and look around with other options. One could be interesting is to store the IFC GUID in an element. That's an option. But I won't go into that detail right now. And I will save the setup. And so once you've done that, you can export your file. I won't do it now for the sake of time, but I will show you the result of different configuration. So here we're in BIMsync. Let's go on the model called IFC from Revit. And I will show you the original one I made with basic settings that are most likely like correct, I would say. So if you have the proper geometry, for instance, and you have like some nice data, or at least the minimum required, which are some presets about wall product requirements, some information about the wall itself, also some information about the slab, and the base quantities that you may need at some point. And you have exactly the geometry you wanted to export, right? So now if I do another export that is a bit more messy, first in this example, you can see that the orientation of the model is slightly different. So it's been another choice in the exporter, and all the model has been exported. And this is because in the IFC export setup, the setup was set without having export only elements visible in the view. And that's really a mandatory one. Also here you will see that the elements have tons of properties that you are not required to give at all. It's way too much, redundant sometimes. So it's because everything here has been exported from Revit. So it was the setting property set, Revit property set. So unless you really know why you're doing this, you definitely shouldn't do that, right? So as a summary for Revit, again, there's way more stuff you could do here and specify. I won't go into details, but the basics are: set up your project with a view or some views dedicated to IFC export. Deal at least once in your organization, someone needs to set in the export here the IFC options and the mapping table. And then once you are dealing with the regular IFC export, please use a correct setup. It should be saved here, and it should be your office or company setup. One thing to notice is that in the BIMsync add-in, when you use the upload IFC, so you can send directly your IFC to BIMsync to the BIMsync model of your choice. You can also choose from here the export configuration that will be used, and if you use the BIMsync setup configuration, the one that is set here, this will provide you with the best experience in our view without digging and specifying too much. So this is the kind of export that you will have from our plugin. This is the exact setup you will have from our plugin. This is the example. Right, so what did I write here? ArchiCAD now. So yeah, I just remind you of that. So ArchiCAD now. I'm less of an expert of ArchiCAD, so there's probably some details you will notice that I don't know, but at least on the IFC side, I think I have a proper understanding of what you should look at and master in ArchiCAD. And the first thing to talk about is the IFC Project Manager. So let's go to that. Here we go. So we are in ArchiCAD. It's a demo project that is provided with the tool. Nothing new for you, I guess, if you are ArchiCAD users. But there's a nice tool provided that's in the interoperability setup here, IFC Project Manager. So this is a tool that is quite nice dealing with IFCs because it gives you an overview of what is going to be produced from your file in a way. So you have a tree view of the model. So you can explore the levels, you can explore the entities of your project. You can see how it's composed, so how many floors will be exported, how many object elements, and so forth. And you can, more importantly, if you go into, let's say, find a wall, here we go, you can see what properties are attached and what the name sometime, or what some properties can be modified. So when you want to dig into specific properties of your project, once you export it as an IFC, it's really valuable to use this tool because you can view the model, the IFC, in different ways. You can display systems, you can display type products, and you can also select these elements inside the model. So that's also interesting when you want to say, okay, show me, let's say I want to see the staircase from this level. Show it to me in the model. You can use this, and then it will be displayed in your model so you can look into it. And the other way around, when you select an object inside the model, if you use this other tool, it will be displayed in the tree view or in this Project Explorer. So it's a nice way to interact with your project and start to look into IFC properties, IFC data you will have. You see here, for instance, fire rating is 30 minutes. So that's exactly, it's called Project Manager. It could be called IFC Explorer, because that's something you look at before producing any IFC. So that's a very important tool to know. At least the guys or the persons in charge of IFC production in your office need to master this tool, right? Then create your company IFC translator. Oh, what does that mean? Well, translator is the kind of the mapping table that ArchiCAD uses as opposed to Revit. If I show you in the same area, in interoperability IFC Translator, you have a way more extensive setup possible inside ArchiCAD than in Revit. Some would say better. That's okay to say that. And you see that you have translators for imports. So when you push an IFC into an ArchiCAD project, today we'll look at export translators. So translator for export. You have a predefined set of exporters, but you also have the ability to create your own. And that's what I did here. I did two examples of what could be good in an exporter and what could be bad. And I will show you the result in the BIMsync so you can see how it can affect the objects that you have in your IFC. Usually it's okay to use general export. Sometimes people recommend to use the Revit structure export if you want. Yeah, basically, you need to dig into it at least once and make your office translator. So once it's done, it can be shared on templates, it can be shared internally, then you use always the same. Sometime on some projects, the BIM managers will share these files, this IFC translator, and maybe sometime your client will provide you with one because they have a very detailed set of things you can do is in this translator. So how does that work? You have, I will select this one and I call the good, and basically you define settings for the IFC, what scheme you will use, 4, 2x3, a lot of things. Model filter, you can export only some elements. You can use yeah, it's an ArchiCAD mapping. You can use a preset. So again, I won't go into detail, but you can go very far into the details of what you put into your IFC. How do you handle geometry, property mapping, data conversion? That's kind of the one to pay attention to, because if you don't pay attention to that, you can push into the IFC way too much information, and I will show you. And then last but not least, metric unit conversion. That could be also an important one. So let me show you what it gives to have when you export all elements, so data for all element and component data versus IFC properties available in IFC Project Manager. So let me show you the difference inside BIMsync. If I go here, I will take the IFC from ArchiCAD. Let's say use the original general translator. If I show the model here, you will see that you find, the elements from same as in the file that we have in ArchiCAD. And if I select, let's say, a wall, you will see that very few equipment and very few elements from the equipment are set into the property. You see basically almost nothing. Very few information in this one. Now let's put what I call the good. If I select this model, now sometime on some elements, so same, it's depends on what element you specify, but you can find, maybe I need to get out of here to just refresh, sorry. IFC from ArchiCAD, this one. There we go. Let's select this wall and see how it goes. Yeah, so not more configuration or equipment, not more, nothing new. Let's see with the bad. So in this example, no, this one I made a mistake. Here we go. It's one of this example where you export way too much information. So you see here, these elements are containing, same as in Revit previously, way too much information. You don't need to put, look at this, all these parameters. That's completely unnecessary, irrelevant, and will make your file bigger and just annoy the BIM manager. So that's not necessary. So again, I won't go into the details of everything you should know and you should do to create a perfect IFC translator for ArchiCAD, but just know that this is an area where you need to pay attention, at least when setting up the projects. You really need to pay attention to see what you export and how you export it. That's super important. So again, I will just remember you. Discover the IFC Project Manager. Show you again inside ArchiCAD. You go to File, Interoperability, IFC Project Manager. That's a tool you need to know. Second, create your company IFC translator, or get one from another company that did a good job that you know, but you need to master, you need to specify what you want to export into the IFC. And lastly, when you do the export itself, File, Save As. Again, you need to master the export settings. So you need to say, I want to export an IFC file. I want to export the entire project or only the visible elements. That could be an important choice. Another good feature inside ArchiCAD is that you have a filter. And that's very important to say, because sometime you will want to export either only some IFC types, IFC categories in a way, and sometimes you will want to export also the first floor, the second floor, the third floor, not the entire building. That could be also a strategy on some projects to have IFCs per levels. You never know. So that's an option that you have. So there's a lot of cool features in this export from ArchiCAD. And finally, you need to select the translator. So here you will select either the ones that are provided, but as I advised you, please use one that you set in your office. So, what can I say more? As a summary, I want to say that you are your IFC. It's a deliverable that you need to control and master, and this, by doing so, this will provide the best value to your customer, to your client, and also to your other colleagues that are project participants. I hope you liked this time with me. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. Reach out if you want to know more about the IFC, if you want to know more about BIMsync. I wish you a very good day and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.